Good morning. I'm a visual learner, so I figured I'd bring y'all some help. I feel like the worship team already preached my sermon, so I really ain't got much to say no more. But we'll give this a try. I am Saundra Anderson, and I am happy to be with you this morning. If you have been joining with us, or if it's your first time, we are in the book of Hebrews still, and we are at verse 32, and we'll be here for a minute. I think Kevin started 32. Yeah, so this is the third round of 32, and today I am going to speak on Gideon. I have Gideon, so let's get into it. Judges 6, verses 11 through 16 is going to be my scripture that I'm going to reference today. And it reads, "The angel of the Lord came and sat down under the oak in Ophrah that belonged to Joash the Abiezrite, where his son Gideon was threshing wheat in a winepress to keep it from the Midianites. When the angel of the Lord appeared to Gideon, he said, 'The Lord is with you, mighty warrior.' 'Pardon me, my Lord,' Gideon replied, 'but if the Lord is with us, why has all this happened to us? Where are all his wonders that our ancestors told us about when he said, "Did not the Lord bring us out of Egypt?" But now the Lord has abandoned us and given us into the hands of Midian.' The Lord turned to him and said, 'Go in the strength you have and save Israel out of Midian's hand. Am I not sending you?' 'Pardon me, my Lord,' Gideon replied, 'but how can I save Israel? My clan is the weakest in Manasseh, and I am the least in my family.' The Lord answered, 'I will be with you, and you will strike down all the Midianites, leaving none alive.'" The reading of the word. So, today, just to give you a backstory of what's happening in this story, we enter this text in a bunch of chaos. So the Midianites have linked up with the Amalekites, and they are fierce warriors. They are brutal. Even in battle, their focus is starting with killing women and children and the weakest. So they utterly destroy everything that the Israelites have. So yet again, God's chosen people are in a situation. And the last sermon I preached, we were just dancing around Jericho, and they just got to the promised land, and these are the great-great-grandchildren of these people, and now they are in a situation where the world around them is total chaos. And for them, everything that they have is being taken away. And they run and hide in the mountains because every time that they get a harvest or every time something good happens in their lives, the Midianites come and take their harvest, take everything that they have. So just to give you a mindset of what's going on in the world around Gideon. So when you find Gideon, he is in this wine press, threshing wheat. And it starts off by saying, "The angel of the Lord came." And that was so profound to me, because what this means is, in Hebrew, this is translated into the Melech Yahweh, which means God himself in human form came down to meet with Gideon. So the God of the universe, the God that holds the stars together, the God that's busy making sure we have everything we need, has stopped everything that he has to do to come down to see about one person. And this is the God that we constantly see, the God that leaves the 99 to come find the one. And that's what I want to talk about today, the presence of God, that when we feel the same, that everything around us is going on, and we feel that, hey, where is God in this situation? Why is all this stuff happening to me? And we think that God is not with us. For 7 years, this is what's happening to them. I think of what's happening just in our world today, and every time we turn around, turn on the news, something is happening, and we're saying, where is God in the midst of all of this? And the Melech Yahweh comes down and stops the world to come see about Gideon. And that's what I so feel today, even from the worship, is that whatever you're going through, all who are weary, the Melech Yahweh, you are so important that he stops the world today to come and sit with you in the midst of all that you're going through. So it says that the Lord came and then he sat with Gideon. So he comes, and Gideon doesn't even recognize him. So the Lord just comes, and he's watching Gideon, and he's threshing wheat, means he's beating this wheat. And his wheat is like Gideon, constantly feeling like he's being beat every day. So imagine Gideon in this wine press, frustrated, hot, probably feeling defeated. And these are the thoughts that's going through his mind. That he's hiding in this wine press because if he goes to the threshing floor where the wheat's supposed to be threshed, then the Midianites is going to sense that he has a harvest and come take it. So he hides in this wine press. And he's beating this wheat. And he's frustrated, wondering, where is this God that my ancestors talked about? We hear these good Bible stories, and we come to church every Sunday, and we're like, on Monday morning, we're like, where is this God when I'm standing in the unemployment line? Where is this God when bad things are happening to me? Gideon is at a point that religion means nothing to him anymore. He's like, why should I even believe in this? Because the God that they talk about isn't the God that's showing up for me. He's showing up for my enemies. And we think the same thing. But as I was researching, I realized that just because they're your enemies, they're still God's people too. And we're somebody's enemies. So when God shows up for us, somebody else is saying, why is God showing up for my enemies? So it's not that God is looking out for your enemies and not looking out for you. God in this moment comes down and he sits with Gideon in the midst of all that he's going through, in the midst of all these questions. And it reminded me that we too are like Gideon. God is there, and sometimes we don't even notice it. So before he just started talking to Gideon, it said he appeared. So we don't even know how long he's sitting there just watching Gideon. And of course, you can see what's going on with this guy. And the first thing that the Lord says is, the Lord is with you, mighty warrior. He could have said what he already knew is, well, you know what? Since you're so ungrateful, since you don't think that I'm with you, he could have left. But the Lord came and sat with Gideon. Most people, when you come around and they stand, that's an indicator that they ain't trying to be there for a long time. If somebody come up to you or come to your office and they say, oh, no, I don't want a seat, they're not trying to stay. But our God came and sat. He dwelt in the midst of Gideon's issue. He don't just come and look at us going through our problems. He don't just come and stand at the door and say, oh, look at James again, struggling. He comes and he sits with us in the midst of what we're going through. And he's literally with us. And the good thing is, It's one thing to have the omnipresence of God, to feel like, hey, while he's with you, he's with me. If I go to Alabama, he's there too. But it's something about the presence of God being with you that's different from his manifest presence, is different from his omnipresent, that the Lord is with you, that whether you see it or not, when you can't see his face, trust his heart. And that's what God does. He comes down and stops the world because he sees the dire need that Gideon and his people have. I was watching the news on Thursday, and I saw that right now is the time of pilgrimage for a lot of different religions. And 1,100 Muslims died on their pilgrimage just to be in the presence of their God. And the Buddhist faith has a similar tradition where once a year, if they can afford it, or even physically able, they travel across the world and they go down this winding road for miles and miles to get on side of a mountain to walk up 268 steps just to be in the presence of a Buddha. And I tried to walk to the mailbox yesterday. I wasn't going up 268 steps. I probably went about 50 steps straight in the heat. And I almost didn't make it. So I am grateful that our God, instead of us having to be able to afford to make this journey, to be able to be healthy enough to make this journey, to hope that once in a lifetime you can go be in the presence of your God, our God, our almighty God that literally holds this earth in orbit, comes down and sits with us. Where whether I'm broke or not, whether I can get out of my bed or not, whether I can make it to church or not, he comes and sits and dwells with us. That's what I'm grateful for. Is that I don't have to do all that to be in his presence. Is that when I'm in need, he sees me and he comes down and he sits with me. And Gideon, he don't even know who he's talking to. If you look at the text, Gideon keeps responding with my Lord with the lowercase L. So I've been watching Bridgerton. Anybody watch Bridgerton? So if you watch Bridgerton, anybody that addresses you as my Lord means that they has some position and nobility. And Gideon is a farmer, so he sees this man and he understands that, hey, he has some significant presence over me, but Gideon doesn't even recognize until verse 22 that he is talking to the Lord Almighty. That he's that important that God came down to where he was hiding. Even when you hide from God, he comes and finds you. And some of you say, oh, I don't want to be seen, I don't want to be seen. But at your core, you want to be seen. You want to be loved. You want to be accepted. You don't want to feel abandoned. And even in that, God says that I came for people who wasn't even seeking me. And this is what God does. He came down to be with Gideon. And then he asks the Lord, he says, why has all this happened to us? Anybody ever ask God, why is this happening to me? Do you ever get an answer? Does the answer even matter? Does it change how you feel if you knew the answer? The Lord in this text, instead of responding to Gideon asking why, he says, go in the strength you have and you saved Midian. Sometimes we be wanting God to come down and fix stuff for us, and he said, everything that you would ever need for life and godliness, I've already deposited into you. And when I am with you, you can do all things. But we be wanting God to do stuff, we be wanting other people to do stuff, and he said, go in the strength you have. And sometimes we focus on the why, and God gives us the answer, and then Gideon says, well, I'm the least in my family. You want to know why? He gives you a solution, and then we make excuses on why it still don't need to be me who need to do it. That's really us. Still today, that is still us. We want to answer, but then we don't want to be the one to do it. Gideon doesn't know that at the end of this chapter, with 300 men, he's going to defeat 140,000 people. Gideon doesn't know that we will be sitting here all these years later reading about him. You don't know who you are or what somebody else could be reading about you 10 years from now or 1,000 years from now, if only we believed in who God said that we could be. But we make excuses and say, who, me? I'm the least in my family. I can't save these people. I can't do this. I can't do that. But we want God to call up somebody else. But then when he calls up somebody else, then we get weary because he's doing it for them, but not doing it for me. What do we want? But that's what we do. But even then, God doesn't chastise him. He doesn't turn his back on him. He looks at him and says, I am with you. And he calls him a mighty warrior. While Gideon thinks that he's nothing but a mere farmer, the Lord sees him and calls him and says, I'm going to tell you who I am, and then I'm going to show you who you are. If only you really knew who you were. And some of you know who you are, but refuse to be who you are. This sermon could have went so many ways on identity, but God's presence and being with us is what I felt he wanted us to know, that regardless of what you may be going through, regardless of how angry you may be in your wine press, where you feel tucked away and hidden, that nobody sees you, my job don't see me, they don't value me, my spouse don't see me, my kids don't see me, nobody values me. But God is saying that I see you, and I'm with you. And he's calling you into more. The wine press was a place of transition. And the wine press is where the grapes realize that they can turn into more. And Gideon is in this place where he's actually doing the opposite. He's threshing wheat in a wine press, which should have been done at a threshing floor. The threshing floor is a place of separation and revelation. It's a place where the harvest was prepared by separating the grain from the useless straw for the purpose of exposing and collecting the most valuable part of the crop. Once the harvest is gathered, the practice of threshing begins with intentional destruction. This technique typically involves crushing the crop under the weight of a sledge or grinding wheel attached to the heavy hooves of oxen. Then the mixture was tossed into the air, allowing the wind to separate the straw from the seed. This process carried the lighter part of the straw away and allowed the seed to fall and collect to the ground. And this process is called winnowing. And that's what I feel the invitation that God is showing us today, that you can be just this. It's cute. I got this from Michael's. I would have been on the side of the road, but then I thought, I probably would have got ran over or trying to get wheat from the side of the road. But this looks good. But if only you knew this could be so much more. And sometimes we're comfortable being this because we don't want to go through the process of being crushed and transition. And we see this where the threshing happens. And sometimes we've been brought up to think that God does this to us. God crushes us. But it's not God. The world does enough of crushing us and breaking us and beating us. What God does in this is, in the process of winnowing, when you pick this up and toss it in the air, the wind, if you're on a threshing floor, blows this useless shaft and it leaves the seed. This small seed is what's left that I put in here. This is the most precious part of all of this. But you can't see this being covered in this. So when we're going through our crushing and our pain, and we wonder, where is God in all of this? God is in the process that when the winnowing happens, and he blows his breath. The ruah, the breath, the life of God is in the wind. Every time you go outside and you feel that breeze, that's a reminder of the presence of God, his life. And that's what God does. He blows away this useless shaft, this stuff that we use to cover us, the stuff that we don't want to expose who we are at our core. But that's what the winnowing does. It blows away all that stuff we don't need, so you can reveal who you really are. And with this small grain, the threshing floor is when this grain realizes it can be bread to feed people. We can do more than just be a grain of straw. We can multiply and produce and feed other people if only we got to our core to see who we really are. So in the midst of feeling crushed, in the midst of wondering where is God when all this stuff is happening to us, know that the Melech Yahweh sees you, and he stops the world, and he comes and sits and dwells with us. And he blows his life in us and transition us from wheat to grain so that we can be all that he's called us to be. The Lord is with you, mighty warrior. So when you feel alone, when you feel abandoned, when you feel that, where is God? He did it for my ancestors. He did it for everybody else. Why ain't he doing it for me? And sometimes that's where a lot of us wind up in a cave wondering, where is God while all this stuff is happening to me? And this story reminds us that if God could see Gideon, God is no respecter of man that he can't see you too. That he won't come down to be with you in the midst of what you're going through. So the invitation today is to come to the threshing floor. All who are weary, all who already feel beat down, and broken. All who feel abandoned, God is with us. And he's ready to blow his fresh breath on us. That the old things will fall off, and behold, a new thing, a beautiful thing, he's ready to make out of you. So whether you come, I have the old, and in this series, it's like we've been looking at the past to be in the present so that we can see our future. So I want you to grab hold of these so you can see the past of who you were. Be in this present moment and feel God's presence as he sits with you. And grab a hold to your future of this new thing that he's created in you so that you can take this to look back, to be present, to have hope and faith in your future, that God is with you. So go in the strength that you have. Mighty warrior. Amen.